What happens when a prince refuses to play by the rules of late-night television? What unfolds when years of royal protocol clash head-on with American comedy's sharpest wit? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that shocked audiences worldwide as Prince Harry faced off against Stephen Colbert in what started as a routine interview, but quickly spiraled into television chaos. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really happened behind the scenes. The Late Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Stephen Colbert adjusted his tie, reviewing his notes one final time as the production crew made their final preparations. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, sat in the green room, his security detail positioned strategically nearby. This wasn't his first American television appearance. But something felt different tonight. The tension in the air was palpable even before the cameras started rolling. As the show's iconic theme music filled the Ed Sullivan Theater, Colbert delivered his opening monologue with his trademark wit and political commentary. The audience laughed and applauded at all the right moments, completely unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. When Colbert introduced his guest, the crowd erupted in enthusiastic cheers. Prince Harry walked onto the stage with his usual composed demeanor, waving to the audience before taking his seat next to the host's desk. The interview began cordially enough. Colbert, known for his ability to blend humor with serious journalism, started with lighter questions about Harry's life in California, his various charitable endeavors, and his recent projects. The prince responded with practiced ease, offering carefully measured answers that revealed just enough personal insight to keep the audience engaged while maintaining his composure. For the first 10 minutes, everything proceeded exactly as both men had likely expected. But then Colbert shifted gears, as he often does, diving into more pointed territory. He brought up the ongoing discussions about the monarchy's role in modern society, the conversations about institutional reform, and the various controversies that had surrounded the royal family in recent years. Harry's responses became noticeably more guarded, his body language shifting almost imperceptibly as he straightened in his chair. The turning point came when Colbert, with his characteristic directness, asked about the financial aspects of Harry's departure from royal duties. The host had clearly done his homework, referencing specific details about security costs, residence arrangements, and the various business ventures that had emerged since Harry and Meghan's move to America. The questions weren't necessarily hostile, but they were probing in a way that seemed to catch the prince off guard. Harry's media training kicked in, and he attempted to deflect with humor, making a light comment about American curiosity regarding royal finances. The audience chuckled, but Colbert wasn't deterred. He pressed forward, asking about the apparent contradictions between seeking privacy while simultaneously engaging in high-profile media projects. The studio audience began to sense the shift in atmosphere, the laughter becoming more scattered and uncertain. That's when Harry made what would later be described as a crucial mistake. Instead of maintaining his diplomatic composure, he allowed a flash of irritation to show through. He questioned whether Colbert truly understood the complexities of his situation, suggesting that the host was oversimplifying matters that were far more nuanced than they appeared from the outside. The comment wasn't aggressive, but it carried an undertone that experienced television viewers immediately recognized as dangerous territory. Colbert, a veteran of political comedy who had sparred with presidents and prime ministers, wasn't about to let the moment pass. He leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from genial host to skilled interrogator. He asked Harry to explain exactly what the audience was missing, what complexities they couldn't understand from their limited perspective. The question was delivered with Colbert's signature blend of curiosity and challenge, the kind of approach that had made him one of America's most respected late-night hosts. The prince found himself in an impossible position. He couldn't elaborate without potentially revealing more than he intended, but he also couldn't retreat without appearing evasive. His handlers in the wings were likely feeling the first stirrings of concern as they watched their carefully planned media appearance begin to veer off script. Harry chose to push forward, explaining that the American media, despite its thoroughness, often missed the deeper cultural and institutional factors that influenced royal decision-making. Colbert pounced on this opening with the precision of a seasoned journalist. He asked specific questions about these cultural factors, about the institutional pressures Harry referenced, and about how these elements had shaped the prince's own choices. Each question was perfectly reasonable on its surface, but collectively they were building towards something more confrontational. The audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something unexpected and potentially historic. Harry's responses became increasingly defensive. He began speaking faster, his carefully maintained public persona showing cracks as he tried to address Colbert's rapid-fire questioning while simultaneously protecting information he clearly didn't want to share publicly. The prince started making references to conversations and decisions that the audience couldn't fully understand, creating an atmosphere of confusion and growing tension in the studio. Colbert recognized the signs immediately. Years of interviewing politicians, celebrities, and world leaders had taught him to read the subtle cues that indicated when a guest was becoming uncomfortable. But instead of easing back, he made a calculated decision to lean into the moment. This was, after all, what great television was made of, and his audience deserved authenticity over politeness. The host's next question cut straight to the heart of the matter. He asked Harry directly about the apparent contradiction between criticizing media intrusion while simultaneously courting that same media attention through various projects and appearances. Colbert's tone remained conversational, but there was an unmistakable edge to his words that made it clear he expected a real answer, not another diplomatic deflection. Harry's face flushed slightly, a reaction that the cameras captured in unforgiving detail. For a moment he seemed to weigh his options, glancing briefly toward the wings where his team was stationed. When he turned back to Colbert, something fundamental had shifted in his demeanor. The practiced royal composure was cracking, replaced by something more raw and human, but also potentially more volatile. The prince's response was sharp and immediate. He questioned whether Colbert had ever experienced the kind of relentless scrutiny that came with being born into the public eye, whether the host could truly understand what it meant to have every personal decision dissected and criticized by millions of strangers. His voice carried a bite that hadn't been there moments before, and the studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Colbert, however, was in his element. This kind of heated exchange was precisely what he excelled at, and he responded with a mixture of empathy and challenge that demonstrated why he had become one of America's most respected interviewers. He acknowledged that he couldn't personally understand that level of scrutiny, but pointed out that many public figures faced similar challenges without the advantages of royal privilege and inherited wealth. The comment about privilege struck a nerve that Harry had clearly been trying to protect. His response was immediate and passionate, explaining that privilege came with costs that outsiders never considered, that every advantage carried corresponding responsibilities and restrictions that were impossible to quantify. He spoke about the weight of expectations, the impossibility of living up to idealized public images, and the personal toll of constant judgment. But Colbert wasn't finished. He pressed further, asking whether those costs justified some of the choices Harry had made, whether the difficulties he described gave him the right to criticize institutions while simultaneously benefiting from them. The question was delivered with surgical precision, targeting exactly the kind of contradiction that made for compelling television, but also created genuine discomfort for the person being questioned. Harry's response revealed just how deeply the question had affected him. He leaned forward in his chair, his voice rising slightly as he explained that criticism and participation weren't mutually exclusive. That caring about an institution meant wanting it to improve rather than simply accepting its flaws. His words came faster now, with less of the careful consideration that had marked his earlier responses. The host sensed that he had found the pressure point that would define this interview. He asked Harry to elaborate on what specific improvements he thought were necessary, what changes he believed would address the problems he had identified. It was a fair question on the surface, but it required Harry to either make specific criticisms of his family and their institution, or to retreat into generalities that would make his previous comments seem hollow. Harry chose a middle path that satisfied no one. He spoke about modernization and adaptation, about the need for institutions to evolve with changing times, but he avoided naming specific problems or proposing concrete solutions. His answer felt evasive even to viewers who were sympathetic to his position, and Colbert's expression made it clear that he found the response inadequate. The host's follow-up question was devastating in its simplicity. He asked Harry whether he believed his own departure from royal duties represented the kind of modernization he was describing, or whether it was simply a personal choice that he was now trying to frame in broader terms. The question forced Harry to either claim that his individual decisions represented institutional reform or to admit that his criticisms were primarily personal rather than principled. Harry's response was the moment when the interview truly began to spiral out of control. Instead of answering directly, he questioned whether Colbert was genuinely interested in understanding his perspective or simply looking for sound bites that would generate controversy. The accusation hung in the air between them, transforming what had been a tense but professional exchange into something more personal and confrontational. Colbert's reply was swift and pointed. He reminded Harry that he had chosen to appear on the show, that no one had forced him to accept the invitation or to make the statements he had made. The host suggested that if Harry wasn't prepared to defend his positions or answer direct questions about them, perhaps he shouldn't have agreed to discuss them in a public forum. The exchange had now moved far beyond the realm of typical late-night television. Both men were speaking with an intensity and directness that made the studio audience feel like unwitting witnesses to a private argument. Harry's team in the wings was undoubtedly calculating the potential damage, while Colbert's producers were probably weighing the entertainment value against the risk of completely alienating their guest. Harry's next statement would later be replayed countless times across social media and news programs. He told Colbert that the host's questions revealed exactly the kind of superficial understanding that made meaningful dialogue about these issues impossible. He suggested that American media, despite its reputation for hard-hitting journalism, often missed the deeper complexities of situations it claimed to analyze. The comment was a direct challenge to Colbert's professional competence, and the host's response reflected his years of experience dealing with difficult guests. He calmly asked Harry to explain what specific complexities he believed were being overlooked, what crucial information the audience needed to properly understand the situation being discussed. Harry found himself trapped by his own words. Colbert's calm request for specifics had put him in an impossible position where any detailed response would either reveal private family matters or expose the weakness of his arguments. The prince's frustration became increasingly visible as he struggled to find a way forward that wouldn't compromise his position further. His hands gestured more animatedly as he spoke, and his voice carried an edge of desperation that hadn't been there at the beginning of the interview. The prince attempted to regain control by pivoting to broader themes about media responsibility and public discourse. He spoke about the difference between legitimate journalism and entertainment masquerading as news, about the ethical obligations that came with platforms as influential as Colbert's show. But his comments carried an implicit criticism of the very program he was appearing on, suggesting that the Late Show was part of the problem he was describing. Colbert's expression hardened noticeably. The host had built his career on intelligent, substantive interviews that balanced entertainment with genuine insight, and Harry's comments seemed to dismiss both his professional integrity and the quality of his work. The veteran broadcaster's response was measured, but unmistakably firm. He pointed out that Harry had sought out this appearance, that no one had forced him to book the interview or to make the claims he was now reluctant to defend. The host continued, explaining that his show had always maintained high journalistic standards while also acknowledging its entertainment value. He suggested that Harry seemed to want the benefits of media attention without accepting the accountability that came with making public statements. The observation was delivered with Colbert's characteristic precision, cutting straight to the heart of the contradiction that had been building throughout their exchange. Harry's response revealed just how far the situation had deteriorated. He accused Colbert of misrepresenting his positions, of taking his comments out of context and twisting them to create artificial controversy. His voice rose as he spoke, and for the first time since the interview began, he seemed to forget entirely about the cameras and the audience. This was no longer a public conversation, but a personal confrontation between two strong-willed individuals who had reached an impasse. Colbert remained calm, but his words carried unmistakable authority. He reminded Harry that everything they had discussed was being recorded, that viewers could judge for themselves whether any misrepresentation had occurred. The host suggested that if Harry felt his positions were being distorted, perhaps the problem lay not with the questions being asked, but with the inconsistencies in the positions themselves. The comment struck Harry like a physical blow. His face reened as he leaned forward in his chair, pointing directly at Colbert as he spoke. He accused the host of ambushing him, of using the interview format to make him look foolish rather than engaging in genuine dialogue. Harry's voice carried a tremor of genuine anger, as he suggested that this kind of confrontational approach was exactly what was wrong with American media culture. Colbert's response was the moment that would define the entire encounter. The host calmly explained that every question he had asked was directly related to statements Harry had made publicly, that nothing they were discussing was off-limits or unexpected given the prince's own previous comments. He pointed out that if Harry wasn't prepared to discuss his public positions, he probably shouldn't have made them in the first place. The observation seemed to break something fundamental in Harry's composure. He stood up abruptly from his chair, his movement so sudden that it startled the studio audience into complete silence. For a moment, he towered over Colbert's desk, his body language suggesting barely contained fury. When he spoke, his words carried a level of personal animosity that transformed the entire atmosphere in the studio. Harry accused Colbert of being a bully, hiding behind the pretense of journalism, of using his platform to humiliate guests rather than inform audiences. He suggested that the host's reputation for intelligent discourse was a carefully constructed facade that concealed a more petty and vindictive personality. The attack was personal and direct, crossing every line that typically governed the behavior of talk show guests. Colbert's face showed genuine shock for the first time during the entire encounter. The seasoned broadcaster had dealt with difficult guests before, but rarely had anyone launched such a direct personal attack during a live taping. For a moment, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words. His usual quick wit apparently stunned into silence by the unexpected escalation. But Colbert recovered quickly, drawing on decades of experience handling live television crisis. His response was controlled but firm, explaining that Harry was welcome to disagree with his questions, but that personal attacks were neither necessary nor appropriate. The host suggested that if Harry was unable to continue the conversation civilly, perhaps it would be best to end the interview early. Harry's reaction was immediate and explosive. He accused Colbert of trying to silence him, of attempting to control the narrative by threatening to end the interview when challenged. His voice carried a note of hysteria as he suggested that this was exactly the kind of institutional bullying he had been trying to escape by leaving royal life. The irony of his complaint seemed lost on him entirely. The situation had now moved completely beyond the realm of salvageable television. Harry continued speaking, his words tumbling over each other, as he aired grievances that seemed to extend far beyond his immediate conflict with Colbert. He spoke about being misunderstood, about having his motives constantly questioned, about the impossibility of living up to expectations that shifted without warning or explanation. Colbert made one final attempt to restore order, asking Harry to return to his seat so they could continue their conversation more constructively. But the prince was beyond such diplomatic solutions. He accused the host of trying to manipulate him, of using false courtesy to mask continued aggression. His paranoia was now evident to everyone in the studio, and the audience watched in uncomfortable silence as the situation spiraled completely out of control. That's when Harry made the comment that would end his appearance definitively. He suggested that Colbert's entire career was built on tearing down people who were more accomplished than himself. That the host's success came from making guests look foolish rather than from any genuine talent or insight. The attack was so personal and so obviously unfair that even viewers who sympathized with Harry's earlier positions found themselves unable to defend his behavior. Colbert's response was swift and final. He thanked Harry for his time, announced that they would be taking a commercial break, and gestured toward the wings where the prince's security team was already moving into position. The message was clear without being explicitly stated. Harry's appearance was over, and he needed to leave immediately. But Harry wasn't finished. As his security team approached, he continued speaking, his voice now carrying a note of genuine desperation. He accused Colbert of cowardice, of hiding behind commercial breaks and security personnel, rather than facing the legitimate criticisms that had been raised. His words echoed through the studio, even as his team began gently but firmly escorting him toward the exit. The last image viewers saw before the commercial break was Harry being guided off the stage, still speaking animatedly to anyone who would listen, while Colbert sat at his desk with an expression of genuine bewilderment. The contrast between the host's professional composure and the prince's obvious agitation created a visual that would be replayed and analyzed for days to come. As the studio lights dimmed and the audience sat in stunned silence, it was clear that everyone present had witnessed something unprecedented in the normally controlled world of late-night television. The carefully managed public image that Harry had spent years constructing had crumbled in the space of a single disastrous interview, leaving behind questions about judgment, temperament, and the real person behind the carefully crafted public persona. What do you think really pushed Prince Harry over the edge in this confrontation? Was it Colbert's relentless questioning, or something deeper that had been building for years? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.